My name is Sarah Miller. I'm 35 years old, and until that afternoon, I thought my family was unbreakable. My husband, David, and I had been together for 15 years. We built a small but beautiful life in Austin, Texas, raising our only child, Ethan, who had just graduated from college. I worked as a school counselor, and David ran a small construction business. We weren't rich, but we had peace. Or at least, that's what I thought. That day, Ethan's graduation ceremony was supposed to be one of the proudest moments of our lives. The auditorium was filled with laughter, clapping, and flashing cameras. Rows of proud parents sat holding bouquets, waving banners, and whispering words of pride. The air smelled of flowers, cologne, and hope. I wore a simple blue dress and held a small gift bag in my lap. David was seated beside me, in a dark suit and a tight smile. Across from us were some of our closest friends, Mark and Linda, who had known us since college. I thought everything was fine. I thought we were celebrating the same dream. But that illusion shattered right there in front of everyone. When Ethan's name was called, David and I both stood, clapping proudly. I even shouted, "That's my boy." He turned and waved at us with that big grin that always reminded me of the first time he learned to ride a bike. My heart swelled with love and pride. And then, as the ceremony ended and the crowd began to cheer, David leaned forward, stood up, and clinked his glass, like someone about to give a toast. My stomach turned. He had that expression calm, but sharp. Something about his eyes looked final. He cleared his throat and said, loud enough for everyone around to hear, "I'd like to say something." People turned to look. I thought he was about to praise our son. I smiled politely. But then, "Sarah," he said, still looking straight ahead, "I've decided to start a new life without you." The sound of clapping froze midair. A fork clattered against a plate somewhere behind me. The air changed. I blinked, sure I'd misheard. "What?" But he didn't stop there. He gestured toward the far end of the table. "I think it's time everyone knows the truth. I've been seeing someone, and she's here today." The world spun. My throat closed. I followed his pointing hand, straight toward our friend's table. There, among them, was a man I'd seen before. His name was Eric, one of Mark's business associates. He looked pale, nervous, trying to avoid my eyes. And next to him sat a woman I didn't recognize, younger, dressed in red, with her hand resting on David's jacket. Murmurs filled the air. A few guests gasped. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." David smiled slightly, the way people do when they think they're being brave. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I should have told you sooner." I could feel every pair of eyes on me. I wanted to disappear. My son was standing there, frozen, his cap in hand, confusion twisting his face. And then, something in me just stopped breaking. I took a deep breath, forced my tears back, and smiled. "Congratulations on your honesty," I said softly. I stood, reached into my purse, and took out a white envelope. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. I handed it to him. "You might want to open this before you go," I said. He hesitated but took it. I turned to Ethan, gave him a small nod, and started walking toward the exit. The hall was silent, just the echo of my heels on the polished floor. Then, just as I reached the door, I heard it. David screaming. People gasped again. Some stood up. Chairs scraped the floor. His voice cracked like thunder across the hall. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking. But before we get to what was inside that envelope, let me take you back to when life still felt like spring after a long winter, when I believed love was unshakable. Because that moment at the graduation didn't just happen overnight. It started years ago, in quiet ways, through small decisions and forgotten kindness. And maybe, just maybe, it started with me. It's funny how people think heartbreak begins with shouting or betrayal. But often, it starts with silence, those tiny moments when love fades like a candle burning out slowly. When I met David, he was charming, patient, and full of dreams. We met at a volunteer event at a food bank. He was helping load boxes for families during a stormy weekend. I remember how he offered his jacket when the rain started pouring. "You'll catch a cold," he'd said, smiling. That was the moment I thought, this man has kindness written all over him. We got married 2 years later. We didn't have much, a small apartment, a used car, and a lot of faith. Life wasn't easy, but we built everything together. We worked double shifts, saved every penny, and finally bought a small home near the lake. Then Ethan came. That boy changed our world. He was smart, always asking questions, always trying to fix broken things, his toys, the remote, even our hearts when we argued. But over the years, something changed. David became distant. He'd come home late, smelling of whiskey and exhaustion. I'd wait up for him with dinner, and he'd wave me off, saying, "Not tonight, Sarah. I'm tired." At first, I thought it was work stress. Construction was tough. The economy was rough. But then, the distance grew little by little, like a wall forming between us. Still, I stayed kind. I told myself that love wasn't about giving up when things got hard. I prayed. I encouraged him. I told Ethan to always be patient with people, that kindness was never wasted. But kindness doesn't mean blindness. I noticed the phone calls he took outside, the sudden gym sessions, the new shirts, the extra cologne. He'd laugh at his phone sometimes, then hide it when I walked in. I asked once gently, "Is everything okay?" He smiled. "Everything's fine, Sarah. Don't overthink it." I wanted to believe him. For our son. For our history. For that man who once gave me his jacket in the rain. Months passed. I started focusing more on my work at the school. Helping children who came from broken homes became my mission. Maybe it was my way of holding on to fix what I was afraid was breaking in my own house. But the truth has a strange way of surfacing. One afternoon, I came home early. His truck was in the driveway. The house was quiet, except for a faint laugh from the living room. I peeked in, expecting maybe he was watching TV. But instead I saw him, on the phone, smiling the way he used to smile only at me. He was saying, "Yeah, I can't wait to see you again." My stomach dropped. I backed away quietly. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I just sat on our porch for hours, listening to the sound of birds, trying to remember when we last laughed together. That was when I realized sometimes love doesn't end because someone stops caring. It ends because one person forgets to notice the other's quiet pain. I told myself I'd wait until after Ethan's graduation to decide what to do. I wanted that day to be about him, not us. I wanted him to remember joy, not bitterness. But fate had its own plans. So when David stood up that day, announcing his new life, I wasn't completely shocked. What shocked me was his timing, his coldness, his public betrayal in a moment meant for our son. And that envelope I handed him? It wasn't revenge. It was truth. But we'll get there soon. For now, let's go back a few months before that day, the time when I first met the woman who unknowingly set all this in motion. Because she didn't just walk into my husband's life. She walked into mine, too. Before we move forward, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Are you from Canada? The US? Maybe somewhere else? Because this story, my story, isn't just about heartbreak. It's about rediscovery, strength, and what happens when kindness meets betrayal. And trust me, the moment David opened that envelope was only the beginning. Because what came next changed everything for all of us. The morning sun spilled through my kitchen window, catching the edge of my coffee cup as I sat there, staring into the steam like it might give me answers. It had been 3 months before the graduation. Back then, I was still trying to convince myself that everything was fine, that the hollow silence between David and me was just a phase. But deep down, I already knew, the kind of knowing that lives in your bones before it reaches your mind. That morning, I had just come back from my shift at the school. I worked with children who carried invisible burdens, divorced parents, sick siblings, bullies at school. I always told them, no matter what happens around you, you can still choose kindness. But lately, I felt like a fraud. Because at home, I was losing the fight to stay kind. David walked in from the garage, adjusting his shirt. He looked different. Sharper. More polished. I smiled and said, "Morning, love. Want some coffee?" He barely looked at me. Already had some. I'm meeting a client. His phone buzzed, and he quickly turned it face down. That wasn't new anymore. I asked, another new client? He nodded too quickly. Big project. Could be good money for us. He kissed my forehead in that rushed, polite way that doesn't mean much anymore, grabbed his keys, and left. I sat there, my hand still holding the coffee pot midair, watching the door close behind him. That's when I saw it, his tablet on the counter. He never left without it. I didn't mean to snoop. I truly didn't. But the screen lit up with a message right then, and it was like fate itself whispered. Look. It was a text. From E. Can't wait to see you again tonight. Miss you already kiss mark. My chest went cold. The kind of cold that isn't about temperature. It's the one that settles inside you like your heart just learned a terrible secret. I put the tablet down. My hands were shaking. I wanted to scream, cry, throw it across the room, but instead, I sat down and whispered to myself. It's fine, Sarah. Maybe it's a client. Maybe E stands for Eric or something. But the lie was too heavy even for my own mind to carry. That evening, when David came home, I asked softly, Did your meeting go well? He smiled.
Yeah.
Great, actually. He didn't notice I was staring at him like a stranger. He didn't notice that my eyes were begging for honesty. He didn't notice me anymore. Later that night, after he fell asleep, I stepped out to the backyard. The moon hung low over the water. I could see my reflection in the dark window, tired eyes, hair undone, wearing an old sweatshirt. I whispered to myself, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I've just become boring. But the truth is, love shouldn't make you question your worth. The next morning, I decided to focus on something else, Ethan's graduation. I threw myself into planning, making lists, buying his suit, helping him polish his shoes, and picking a gift that would remind him that no matter what happened between his parents, he was loved endlessly. Ethan was my light. Every time he smiled, it felt like I could breathe again. He was busy finishing his final exams, but he always made time for me. You're working too hard, Mom, he'd say. Relax a little. One afternoon, he asked, Mom, can we invite some of Dad's friends to the graduation dinner? I think he wants to celebrate big. I hesitated. Sure, I said. Who's coming? He listed names, then added, Oh, and there's this lady Dad's been working with, Elena. She's helping with some business stuff. The name hit me like a quiet bell ringing inside my chest.
E.
I smiled weakly. Of course. The more the merrier. And that's how I met her. It was a week later when she came by our house. I was tending to the small garden by the porch, roses, tulips, a few wildflowers that never seemed to stay alive for long. A sleek silver car pulled up, and a woman stepped out. She was beautiful. The kind of beautiful that made you stop what you were doing. Long dark hair, red lipstick, and a perfume that smelled like expensive choices. She smiled brightly. Hi. You must be Sarah. I'm Elena. I work with David. I wiped my hands on my apron, forcing a smile. Yes, of course. Nice to meet you. She extended her hand, soft, confident, manicured. I just came to drop off some blueprints. We're working on a new housing project. Your husband's amazing, by the way. You're lucky. Lucky. The word stung like lemon on a wound. I wanted to laugh. Or cry. Or both. Instead, I said, yes. He's worked very hard. She looked around, pretending to admire the flowers. You have a beautiful home. Must be nice to have such a peaceful life. If only she knew. When she left, I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty driveway, the smell of her perfume still lingering in the air. That night, David came home smiling, humming even. He kissed me on the cheek and said, Elena stopped by. She said you were lovely. I nodded. She's very kind. He didn't notice the way my voice trembled. From that day, I started noticing things I'd ignored before. His shirt smelled faintly, like her perfume. He suddenly cared about the way his hair looked. He started taking calls in the bathroom, whispering. And yet I stayed silent. Because sometimes silence feels safer than truth. Until one evening, an evening that changed everything. It was 2 weeks before the graduation. I was sitting in my car outside the grocery store, the rain drumming gently on the roof, when I saw them. David and Elena. They were standing by her car, laughing, their faces close. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. She leaned in, and they kissed. Not a quick, guilty kiss. A long, familiar one. I froze. My world stopped. My heart didn't break with a crash. It broke quietly, like glass cracking under pressure. I wanted to get out, to confront them, to scream, "Why?" But instead, I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, letting the rain hide my tears. Because sometimes, dignity is the only thing left when love dies. When I finally drove home, I made one decision. I would not cause a scene. I would not fight for someone who had already chosen to leave me. I would protect my son from the storm. But I also knew something else. Elena wasn't just after love. She was after something bigger. And I had proof, because of a file David had accidentally left open on the home computer weeks earlier. One that tied his new projects to money missing from our joint savings. That's when I began preparing the envelope. It wasn't revenge, it was justice. The night before the graduation, I packed everything I needed. The documents, the photos, the statements, the truth. I sealed them carefully, labeled simply, "For the one who thinks he's free." And when I looked in the mirror before leaving that morning, I didn't see a broken woman. I saw someone who had finally learned to choose herself. The graduation hall was beautiful. Banners, balloons, laughter. Friends and family from all over. I smiled through it all, shaking hands, hugging people, pretending everything was fine. Until David stood up with that glass, ready to shatter everything publicly. You already know what happened after that. His voice. The gasps. The shock. My calm smile. The envelope. His scream. But what you don't know, what no one in that hall knew, was what I had put inside that envelope. Because what I found in those files didn't just expose his betrayal. It exposed something far worse. And when he opened it, he didn't just lose me. He lost everything. But we'll get there soon. Because before we talk about what was in that envelope, you need to know what happened the morning after the graduation, when everything I thought was over took a new and dangerous turn. That was the day Elena showed up at my door. The morning after the graduation felt unreal. The kind of morning where silence sounds heavier than words. The world outside looked bright and calm, but inside me, everything was trembling. I sat on the couch, still wearing the same clothes from the night before, my blue dress wrinkled, my eyes red. Ethan hadn't come home that night. I assumed he stayed with his friends, trying to escape the awkwardness that his father had dumped into what should have been his happiest day. I couldn't blame him. I barely wanted to face myself. The scene from the graduation replayed in my mind over and over. The clinking glass, the whispers, David's voice echoing. "I've decided to start a new life without you." And then that scream. His scream. That's what I couldn't forget. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't even feel anger anymore. Just emptiness. I had handed him the truth, and now it was up to him to face what he had built. Or rather, what he had destroyed. The clock on the wall ticked quietly. Then, a knock at the door broke the silence. I hesitated, my heart skipping. Maybe Ethan? Or maybe one of her friends checking in. I opened the door. And there she was. Elena. The woman my husband left me for. She looked perfect, too perfect for someone who should have been hiding in shame. She wore a white blazer, dark sunglasses, and a calm expression that almost made me laugh. "Good morning, Sarah," she said softly, removing her shades. "Can we talk?" I wanted to slam the door, to tell her to disappear from my sight forever. But something in her eyes stopped me. It wasn't arrogance this time. It was fear. "You have 5 minutes," I said coldly. She nodded and stepped inside, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She looked around my living room like she was searching for ghosts. Maybe she was. "I didn't know he would do that yesterday," she began. Announcing it like that. He didn't tell me. I folded my arms. "You're not here to apologize for his lack of class, are you?" She sighed. "No. I'm here because after he opened that envelope, he disappeared." I froze. "What do you mean, disappeared?" She swallowed hard. I tried calling him all night. His phone's off. He didn't go home. His truck's still parked outside the venue. A chill crawled up my spine. Maybe he's hiding, I said flatly. He has plenty of reasons to. She shook her head.
No, Sarah. You don't understand.
That envelope, whatever was in it, it scared him. He called someone right after you left. I was across the hall, and I overheard him say something about they'll come for me now. Then he dropped his phone and ran out. I stared at her, trying to decide whether she was lying or losing her mind. He said they'll come for me now. She nodded.
Yes.
And then he was gone. I stepped back, my mind spinning. The documents in that envelope weren't just about his affair. They were about the illegal money transfers I'd found hidden under his company name. Money moved from construction contracts into offshore accounts, signed with both his and Elena's names. I hadn't meant to expose him to danger. I just wanted him to see the consequences of what he'd done, to force him to confront the mess he'd made. But if someone else was involved in that money trail, someone dangerous, I whispered, Elena, who else knew about those transfers? Her face went pale. Only one man. His name's Victor. He funded the housing project we worked on. He's not someone you want to cross. I felt my chest tighten. What kind of man is he? Her eyes flickered away. The kind who doesn't ask questions twice. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her. Her hands trembled as she gripped her purse. You don't get it, Sarah, she said. David took something from Victor, something worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now that envelope proves it. You've made him a target. The air left my lungs. You're saying because of what I gave him, he's in danger? Elena nodded slowly. My knees weakened. I sat down on the couch, pressing my palm to my forehead. I had wanted justice, not chaos. I never thought my attempt to protect my son's future would turn into something darker. Elena sat across from me, her tone softening. Sarah, I didn't come to fight. I came because we both need to find him, before Victor's people do. I let out a bitter laugh. You want me to help find the man who betrayed me? She looked at me, with eyes full of regret.
Yes.
Because whether you like it or not, you're the only one he still trusts. That day was a blur. Elena and I drove to all the places David used to go when he needed space. The lake house, the construction site, even his mother's nursing home 2 towns over. Nothing. His phone was still off. His credit cards hadn't been used. At sunset, we stopped by a gas station. I leaned against the car, exhaustion pulling at every bone in my body. You know, Elena said quietly, lighting a cigarette, he talked about you all the time. Even when we started seeing each other. He said you were the best person he ever knew. That you forgave too easily. I looked at her sharply. Is that supposed to make me feel better? She exhaled smoke into the wind.
No.
It's supposed to make you understand why he was scared. You were his conscience, Sarah. And when you handed him that envelope, you killed what little peace he had left. Her words cut deep. For years, I'd been the calm in his storm. But maybe, just maybe, I had become his storm too. Before I could reply, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello. A male voice, low and shaky, came through. Sarah? I froze. David. There was a pause. Then his voice again, barely a whisper. You shouldn't have done it. Done what? You shouldn't have shown them, Sarah.
They know now.
They know you have the rest. My heart thudded. The rest of what? Silence. Then a deep breath. Get out of the house. Don't trust anyone. They're coming for it. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the sound of static still ringing in my ear. Elena's face went pale. Was that him? I nodded slowly. He said they're coming. Coming for what? She asked. I looked her in the eyes. For the evidence. She frowned. You mean the copy of the documents? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She saw it in my expression. I had kept a second copy. And now someone knew. We rushed back to my house. By the time we got there, night had fallen. The lights from the street cast long shadows across the yard. My hands shook as I unlocked the door. Inside, everything was as I Left it until I noticed the curtain fluttering in the living room. The window was open. Elena stepped in behind me, whispering, "Sarah, stay close." We moved slowly toward the hallway. The sound of something shifting came from the kitchen. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a heavy glass vase. Then, a voice from the dark corner of the kitchen said softly, "You shouldn't have come back." I froze. Elena's breath hitched. A tall shadow stepped forward, his face barely visible. I couldn't see his eyes, but his tone was cold, deliberate. "Where's the drive, Mrs. Miller?" Elena whispered under her breath. "Oh my God. Victor sent them." I tightened my grip on the vase. "Who are you?" He ignored the question.
The drive.
"Where is it?" I could feel Elena trembling behind me. My mind raced. If I told him, he'd take it, and maybe take us too. If I lied, he might not believe me. I looked him straight in the eyes, forcing calm into my voice. "You'll never find it." He stepped closer, pulling something from his jacket. My breath caught, but before I could react, Elena shouted, "Run." The next moment shattered the silence, glass breaking, a loud crash, the sound of footsteps pounding across the floor. I ran. My heart felt like it would explode. I reached the back door, yanked it open, and stumbled into the night. Behind me, I heard shouting, Elena's voice, then another sound that froze my blood. A gunshot. I turned, eyes wide, staring at the glowing window of my house as the echo faded into the night. "Elena!" I screamed. No answer. Only silence. And in that silence, I realized whatever I had uncovered in those documents wasn't just a family secret. It was a war, and I had just stepped into the middle of it. The night sky looked endless as I stood in the backyard, frozen, my ears still ringing from that single, deafening gunshot. The air was thick with fear, the kind that makes your heart forget how to beat. My whole body shook, my breath shallow. "Elena!" I called again, my voice cracking. "Elena, answer me." No reply. Only the low creak of the wind moving through the half-open kitchen window. I wanted to rush back in, but my mind screamed no. The man could still be inside. My phone was still in my hand, and with trembling fingers I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? I could barely speak. Someone broke into my house. There's been a gunshot. Please send help. The operator kept me on the line, telling me to stay hidden until officers arrived. I crouched behind the shed, my bare feet pressing into the cold grass. Every sound felt sharper. The chirp of crickets, the distant rumble of a passing car, my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then, flashing red and blue lights filled the street. The police cars screeched to a stop in front of my house. Two officers moved quickly toward the door, guns drawn. I stood, stumbling forward, waving my hands. "He's inside. There's someone inside." They rushed past me, shouting commands. I heard their boots slam against the floorboards, a crash, then silence again. A minute later, one of them called out, "Clear." But it wasn't clear. Nothing about that house would ever feel clear again. An hour later, I sat wrapped in a blanket on the back of an ambulance, staring at the flashing lights painting the night in streaks of red. An officer, Detective Ramos, approached, his expression serious but kind. He knelt beside me. "Mrs. Miller, you're safe now. Can you tell me what happened?" I told him everything or almost everything. I left out the parts about the envelope, the offshore accounts, the missing money. I said my husband had disappeared, that someone broke into the house, and that I thought my friend might still be inside. He nodded slowly, jotting notes. Our team found no suspect in the home. No one was there when we arrived. I frowned. But I heard a gunshot. "What about Elena? The woman who was with me?" He hesitated. "We found a broken vase, some blood on the kitchen floor, but no body." My stomach twisted. "No body? What does that mean?" He looked at me carefully. "It means she could still be alive or someone took her." The thought hit me like a hammer. I clutched the blanket tighter, my fingers digging into the fabric. Ramos continued, Do you have any idea who could have wanted to hurt you or your husband? I swallowed hard. My mind screamed, tell him everything, but my heart whispered, not yet. Because if Victor really was who Elena said he was, if this was bigger than a marital betrayal, then telling the police without proof could make everything worse. I shook my head slowly. No, I don't know who would do this. He gave me a long look, like he didn't quite believe me, then stood. We'll patrol the area tonight. You should stay somewhere safe, maybe with family. Family.
Ethan.
I pulled out my phone, my hands still trembling, and dialed his number. It rang twice before his sleepy voice answered.
Mom?
It's 3 a.m. Are you okay? The moment I heard his voice, I broke. Tears poured down my cheeks. Ethan? Someone came to the house. I'm okay now, but I need you to stay where you are, okay? Don't come here yet.
What?
What happened? I'll explain later. Just promise me you'll stay with your friend tonight. He was quiet for a moment. Is this about Dad? The question hit me like a dart to the heart. I whispered, yes, sweetheart. It is. By sunrise, I was at a small roadside motel, wrapped in the same blanket, staring out at the parking lot through the thin curtain. The police had left, promising to keep me updated, but I felt more alone than ever. Sleep was impossible. My mind kept replaying Elena's last words, the fear in her eyes when she said Victor's name. I opened my bag and pulled out the small black USB drive I had hidden inside an old makeup pouch, the second copy. The one David didn't know about. It was the reason they came. The reason for the gunshot. I plugged it into my laptop. My hands shook as the screen lit up with folders, contracts, transfers, invoices, and one labeled private. Inside private was a single video file. Curious and terrified, I clicked play. The screen flickered. It was footage from what looked like a warehouse office. The camera angle was slightly tilted, like it was placed secretly. David was there, sitting at a desk, nervously signing papers. And across from him was a man I had never seen before. Bald. Thick beard. Sharp eyes. He was calm, too calm. The man slid a folder across the table. You'll get the $50,000 up front, he said in a deep voice. The rest after the job's done. And remember, no paper trail. David nodded quickly, sweating. Understood. The man leaned closer to the camera, and for the first time, I saw his face clearly. Elena's words echoed in my head. His name's Victor. The man smiled coldly. You cross me, Miller, and you'll wish you hadn't. The video ended. My hands flew to my mouth. The money. The missing funds. The accounts in David's name. They weren't just shady deals, they were part of something illegal. And now that I had this evidence, I was part of it too. I shut the laptop and sat in the dark motel room, my thoughts spinning. I couldn't go to the police yet, not without proof that Victor was involved in more than just bad business. And I couldn't reach David. His phone was still off. I needed help. But who could I trust? That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. I hesitated, then answered. Hello. A voice whispered, Sarah. It's me. It was Elena. You're alive. I breathed out, relief flooding through me. Where are you? I don't have much time, she said quickly. They think you still have the rest of the files. You need to leave town.
Now.
Elena, what's going on?
Who are they?
She sighed shakily. You were right about David's accounts. But it's not just about money. It's about land deals, fake housing permits, stolen investments. Victor's losing millions. And he thinks you're the leak. My stomach twisted. I didn't tell anyone. I know. But they don't believe that.
They want the drive.
Sarah, you have to go before. Her voice cut off. Elena? Elena. Nothing but static. Then a new voice came through.
Deep. Calm.
Familiar. Mrs. Miller. We need to talk. My heart stopped. It was Victor. You've been very busy, he said. I think it's time we met. You have something that belongs to me. I whispered. You're making a mistake. I didn't steal anything. He chuckled softly. Then you won't mind returning what isn't yours. I try to keep my voice steady. What happens if I don't? His tone darkened. Then I collected myself. The line went dead. I dropped the phone, my body trembling. For a moment, everything was still. The hum of the motel fridge, the faint sound of cars outside, my pulse echoing in my ears. Then, headlights flashed across the curtain. A black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Slowly, quietly, I turned off the lights and crawled away from the window. My breath came in short gasps. The SUV door opened. Two figures stepped out, scanning the row of rooms. One of them pointed at mine. I pressed my back against the wall, clutching the USB drive like it was the last piece of my soul. And then, the doorknob began to turn. My heart raced so fast I thought it would burst. I had seconds, just seconds, to decide what to do. Run? Hide? Scream? The door creaked open. A flashlight beam cut through the dark. "Mrs. Miller," a voice said softly. "We just want to talk." I didn't believe them for a second. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my car keys, bolted through the bathroom window, and ran into the night. Behind me, I heard footsteps.
Shouts.
And as I jumped into my car, tires screeching against the gravel, I realized something that sent a chill straight through me. They didn't just want the files. They wanted me. The road ahead was black and empty, just a ribbon of cracked asphalt stretching into nowhere. My headlights cut through the darkness as the motel disappeared behind me. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, my breath shallow, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Every bump in the road felt like a gunshot. Every shadow looked like it might move. I had no plan, no destination. Just one instinct. Run. I didn't even know where I was going until I saw the old Harper gas station sign glowing faintly in the distance. It was an old place, half abandoned, but I remembered it from years ago when David and I used to drive through this area. I pulled in fast, tires crunching against gravel. The station looked deserted, except for an old truck parked near the side. The flickering light above the door buzzed like it was about to die. I cut the engine, sat still for a second, and tried to breathe. Then I saw movement. A shadow behind the counter inside. I froze, but before I could reverse, a figure stepped into the light. It was Elena. I blinked, not trusting my eyes. She looked pale, shaken, her hair a mess, one arm wrapped around her ribs like she'd been hurt. I jumped out of the car. "Elena!" She looked up and quickly waved me inside. "Sarah, get in here, hurry." I rushed in, locking the door behind me. She leaned against the counter, wincing slightly. "They're tracking you. They traced your call. I had to ditch my phone and come here before they found me." "What are you talking about? How did they?" She cut me off. "Victor's men run the security firm your husband hired last year. Every camera, every GPS ping, it's all monitored. They've known where you are since you left home." My stomach sank. "So they know I'm here now?" "Not yet," she said quickly. "We have a few minutes before the signal updates." She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. "I found something before they grabbed me last night. A name. Someone who can help you." I unfolded it. Scrawled in shaky handwriting was, "Agent Carson, FBI, Financial Crimes Division, Baltimore Field Office." I looked up. "The FBI?" Elena nodded. "He's been investigating Victor for months. I met him once, off the record. He told me if anything ever happened, I should bring him the evidence." I gripped the note tightly. "So if I take this to him, he can protect you. But only if you get there before Victor finds you." I stared at her, torn between relief and panic. "What about you?" She gave a small, tired smile. "I'll make a distraction. Draw them away long enough for you to leave." "No, you can't." Her expression hardened. "Sarah, listen to me. You have a son. You can still fix this. But if you stay, we both die." The air between us hung heavy. The hum of the old fridge filled the silence. Then we both heard it, the crunch of tires outside. Elena's eyes widened.
"Go."
"Back door."
"Now."
I hesitated only for a second before running toward the rear exit. I pushed it open, the cold night air biting my face. Behind me, I heard voices, men shouting. "Elena," one barked. And then, the unmistakable crack of a gunshot. I froze for a split second. My heart screamed to go back. But my brain screamed louder, "If you go back, it's over." So I ran. I tore through the trees behind the station, branches cutting my arms, my breath burning in my chest. I didn't stop until I reached the highway. I flagged down a passing truck, waving frantically. The driver, a man in his 50s with a kind face, slowed down, rolling down his window. "You okay, ma'am?" I nodded quickly, lying through my teeth. "Car broke down. Can you give me a lift?" "Just to the next town." He looked hesitant for a moment, then nodded.
Sure.
"Hop in." I climbed into the passenger seat, clutching my bag like it was my lifeline. As we drove away, I glanced back through the rear window. The gas station was on fire. Flames shot up into the night sky, turning the horizon red. And I knew, deep down, that Elena was gone. By the time the sun rose, I was 50 miles away, on the outskirts of Baltimore. The truck driver dropped me off near a diner, gave me a sympathetic nod, and drove off. I stood there, exhausted, covered in dirt and soot, clutching the note with the FBI agent's name. Agent Carson. I had one chance. I walked into the diner, used the payphone, and dialed the number written beneath his name. It rang twice before a man answered. "Carson." My throat felt dry. "Agent Carson, my name is Sarah Miller. I have information about a man named Victor and some fraudulent accounts tied to my husband's company. I think my life's in danger." Silence. Then the faint sound of typing. "Where are you calling from, Mrs. Miller?" "A diner off Route 41. "Near," he interrupted, calm but urgent. "Stay where you are. Don't talk to anyone. I'm sending someone to pick you up in 15 minutes. I exhaled, relief flooding through me. Thank you, thank you." But before I could finish, I noticed something through the diner window. A black SUV pulling into the parking lot. 2 men in suits stepped out, scanning the area. The same SUV from the motel. My blood went cold. I whispered into the phone. "They're already here." Carson's tone sharpened instantly. "Mrs. Miller, listen to me. Go out the back door. There's an alley. Run east toward the railroad tracks. My team's en route. Do not stop." I hung up, grabbed my bag, and slipped out the kitchen door just as the bell above the front door rang. I ran, harder than I'd ever run in my life. Past dumpsters, fences, and broken crates. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't stop. Behind me, I heard shouting. Boots hitting pavement. Then, from somewhere ahead, a black sedan screeched to a stop. A man in a dark suit stepped out, badge flashing. "Sarah Miller?" I froze. "Agent Carson?" He nodded once, eyes scanning behind me. "Get in the car."
I didn't argue.
As I jumped in, I saw the 2 men from the SUV appear at the end of the alley, guns drawn. Carson floored it. The tires screamed as we sped off. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. I clutched the USB drive in my hand as the city blurred past. Carson glanced at me. "You did the right thing calling me. But this isn't just about your husband or Victor. It's bigger than you think." I turned to him, confused. "What do you mean?" He kept his eyes on the road. "We've been tracking Victor's network for over a year. Money laundering, shell companies, offshore investments. Your husband's name came up 6 months ago." My stomach clenched. "You knew about David?" He nodded grimly. "We think he was forced into it. But something went wrong. Victor doesn't tolerate mistakes." I whispered, "He's missing." Carson's jaw tightened. "Then I'm afraid you might be the only one who can prove what really happened." The city lights glimmered ahead. My pulse slowed just enough for me to whisper, "So what happens now?" He looked at me through the rearview mirror. "Now," he said, "we find out if your husband is still alive." The ride to the FBI field office felt like a blur of motion and fear. Agent Carson drove fast, glancing into the rearview mirror every few seconds, his jaw clenched tight. I sat in the back seat, gripping my bag, the USB drive still in my palm like a heartbeat. The city lights of Baltimore began to fade behind us, replaced by long stretches of highway and the faint blue glow of dawn creeping over the horizon. For the first time in days, I felt something that almost resembled safety. Almost. Carson finally broke the silence. Sarah, I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out. So, I told him. I told him about David's affair with Elena, about the strange documents I'd found, about the money transfers to unknown accounts, about the night at the graduation, the envelope, and how Victor's men had come after me. He didn't interrupt, didn't even blink, just kept driving and listening. When I finished, he nodded slowly. That USB drive you have, what exactly is on it? I swallowed hard. Emails, bank records, and a few voice recordings from David's office. Some of them mentioned Victor by name. Carson nodded.
Good.
That's enough to start a case file. But we'll need to cross-check everything before we move forward. Then he turned to me, his eyes softening. You did the right thing, Sarah. Most people would have run and never looked back. I looked out the window. I did run. He gave a faint smile. Yeah, but you also ran toward something. That's the difference. For a while, we drove in silence. The world outside looked peaceful, almost unaware that my life had been torn apart. I thought of Ethan, his smile, his laugh, the way he looked so proud in his graduation gown. I hadn't seen him since that day. Can you find my son? I asked quietly.
Please.
He's all I have left. Carson nodded. We already have a team checking on him. Don't worry. We'll keep him safe. I wanted to believe that. By the time we reached the FBI field office, the sun was up. The building was gray, imposing, and surrounded by quiet security. Inside, everything smelled like coffee and metal. Agents moved briskly through the halls, some carrying folders, others talking into headsets. Carson led me into a small conference room with glass walls and a stack of papers waiting on the table. He gestured to a chair.
Sit.
You're safe here. I sank into the seat, exhaling for what felt like the first time in forever. He plugged the USB drive into a laptop and began scrolling through the files. His eyes narrowed as lines of data filled the screen. You weren't exaggerating, he muttered. These accounts lead to offshore firms registered in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Zurich. And look, each one is tied back to shell companies under Victor's name. He clicked another folder, and my husband's name appeared. David Miller, Transaction Records. My heart skipped. Carson opened it. There were hundreds of transactions. But one, dated 2 days before the graduation, stood out. $2,300,000 wired to North Haven Property Group, Cayman Islands. Authorization code, DM. That's David's signature, I whispered. But he never told me about any of this. Carson leaned forward. Sarah, that's not the only thing. He pulled up another document, an internal message from Victor's company server. It read, Ensure Miller is silenced once the transfer is complete. No loose ends. My blood ran cold. Carson's voice was steady but grave. That message was sent the night before the graduation. I pressed my hand to my mouth. They were going to kill him. Carson nodded. Or they already did. We sat there in silence for a moment. The air felt heavy. I thought back to that day at the graduation, David's strange behavior, the way he smiled at me like he knew it would be the last time. Maybe he'd known he was in trouble all along. Carson stood. I'll get a team to track down North Haven Property Group. We'll cross-check Victor's known locations. In the meantime, you stay here. Don't leave the building. He left the room, shutting the door behind him. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the laptop screen. My reflection glowed faintly on the monitor, tired eyes, cracked lips, and the faint tremble in my hands. Then I heard a soft click. The door opened again. But it wasn't Carson. It was a woman in a dark suit. Her badge said Internal Affairs. She smiled, too calmly. Mrs. Miller? Agent Carson sent me to escort you to a safe room. I frowned. He didn't mention that. She smiled again, but her eyes didn't. It's protocol. We just need to move you somewhere more secure. Something felt wrong. Her voice was too smooth. Her hand hovered near her jacket, too close to where a weapon might be. "Where's Agent Carson?" I asked. She tilted her head slightly. "He's on a call." I stood slowly. "Then I'll wait here until he gets back." Her smile dropped. And that's when I saw it, a small, black tattoo on her wrist. The same triangular mark I'd seen on one of Victor's men at the motel. My breath caught. She saw me notice. And in an instant, she reached for her gun. I reacted before I could think, grabbed the laptop and swung it as hard as I could. It crashed into her wrist, and the gun clattered to the floor. She cursed, lunging for it, but I kicked it under the table and bolted through the door. "Stop her," she screamed. I sprinted down the hallway, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. Agents turned, confused, as alarms began blaring. I didn't know who was real, who was fake, who worked for Victor. I just knew I had to find Carson. I turned a corner, and there he was, running toward me. "Sarah?" I nearly collapsed in relief. "She's one of them."
He didn't hesitate. "Follow me."
We ducked into a stairwell, taking the steps two at a time. My lungs burned, but adrenaline kept me moving. "Victor has a mole inside the bureau," Carson said breathlessly. "We've suspected it for months. You just confirmed it." We burst through a side door into the parking garage. He unlocked a black sedan and we jumped in. "Where are we going?" I asked. He started the engine. "Somewhere safe, but not the bureau." He sped through the exit ramp, tires squealing. I looked at him. "Carson, how deep does this go?"
He sighed.
"Deep enough that even I don't know who to trust anymore." We drove for over an hour, far from the city, until the skyline disappeared behind us. Eventually, Carson turned onto a narrow dirt road, leading to a small cabin surrounded by trees. "This is one of our safe houses," he said. "No signals. No trackers. You'll be safe here for now." He parked the car, got out, and scanned the perimeter before motioning me inside. The cabin was small but clean. A wooden table, a single lamp, a narrow bed, and a window that looked out into endless forest. Carson handed me a burner phone. "If I don't come back within 24 hours, call the number on this paper. Ask for Agent Ruiz. He's the only one I trust." I took it, my fingers trembling. "Where are you going?" He adjusted his holster. "To find out who's leaking information and to confirm if your husband is still alive." My chest tightened. "You really think he could be?" Carson looked at me with something between pity and hope. If Victor needed leverage, he wouldn't kill him right away. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Lock this place up. Don't open it for anyone but me." Then he was gone. The silence after he left was unbearable. Every creak of the cabin made my heart jump. I sat by the window, watching the tree line, gripping the burner phone like a weapon. Night fell quickly, swallowing the world in darkness. At some point, I must have dozed off because when I woke up there was a sound. A slow, deliberate knock on the door.
Once. Twice.
Then a pause. My heart stopped. I whispered to myself, "Carson said not to open it." Then a voice came from the other side of the door.
Soft.
Familiar. "Sarah, it's me. It's David." I froze. Tears filled my eyes. Could it really be him? I stood there, trembling, one hand on the lock, the other clutching the phone. "Please," the voice said again. "Open the door." But something in his tone wasn't right. It was slower, colder, like someone trying to sound like him. And as I stared at the handle, a chill crawled up my spine, because through the small gap under the door, I saw it. 2 pairs of boots. Not one.
2.
For a long, terrifying moment, I didn't move. My eyes stayed fixed on that thin line of shadow beneath the door, the 2 sets of boots barely shifting. Whoever was outside knew I was in here. They were waiting for me to make a mistake. The voice came again, soft but insistent. "Sarah, please, it's really me. I know you're scared." I didn't answer. My throat felt locked shut. Every part of me wanted to run to that door, to believe that somehow my husband had come back from the dead. But something deep inside whispered, "Don't. Don't believe it. Then I heard another voice, faint, muffled by the door. A man. She's in there. Keep your weapon down until we're sure.
Weapon.
I staggered backward, knocking into the small wooden table behind me. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the burner phone. I dialed the number Carson had given me, Agent Ruiz. The line clicked once, then twice, before a tired voice answered. This is Ruiz. I spoke quickly, my voice breaking. This is Sarah Miller. I'm at the safe house. Someone's outside pretending to be my husband. They have weapons. I heard papers rustling, then urgency in his tone. Stay quiet. Don't open the door for anyone. Agent Carson went missing an hour ago. We're tracing his location now. Do you understand me? Don't make a sound.
My heart sank.
Missing?
Yes.
We lost his tracker signal outside the city. Just hold tight. We're sending backup now. The line went dead. Outside, the voices had stopped. The silence was worse. I tiptoed to the window and slowly pulled back the curtain just an inch. A black SUV was parked half-hidden behind the trees, engine off, lights out. Two figures stood near the porch, their outlines faint under the moonlight. One of them was tall, the other broader, heavier. Both wore dark jackets. I swallowed hard. My mind raced. Was there a back way out? A hidden exit? I scanned the small cabin. Just one door. One window. No escape. Then I heard it, the faint click of the door handle turning. They were trying to open it quietly. I grabbed the closest thing I could find, a metal fireplace poker, and pressed myself against the wall beside the door, holding my breath. The latch jiggled again. A pause. Then a voice, this time colder, sharper. If you don't open this door, Sarah, we'll open it for you. The sound of something heavy slamming against the wood made me jump.
Once. Twice.
The third time, a crack appeared near the hinge. My chest tightened. They were breaking in. And then, before they could hit again, headlights flashed through the trees. A second vehicle pulled up fast, tires crunching over gravel. Gunfire erupted outside. Short, sharp bursts that echoed through the forest. I dropped to the floor, covering my head. The glass in the window shattered, spraying across the room. I crawled toward the bed, heart hammering, and slid underneath it. Dust filled my nose, making me want to sneeze, but I pressed my hand over my mouth and stayed still. Outside, I heard shouting, men yelling orders, the crack of more gunfire, then silence. Footsteps approached the door again, slower this time. The handle turned. The door creaked open. Boots stepped inside, careful, deliberate. Sarah. A man's voice called softly. It was Agent Carson. I almost didn't believe it. I slid out from under the bed, trembling. Carson. He turned toward me, lowering his weapon. His face was streaked with dirt, a small cut over his eyebrow. But it was him. He gave a small, tired smile. You okay? I nodded weakly, tears streaming down my face. I thought you were dead. He motioned toward the door. Not yet. But it's close. We have to move now. He helped me up, his hand firm on my arm. There's no time to explain. They've found this location. Ruiz is setting up a transport route to get you to federal custody. You'll be safe there. I stared at him, still shaking. What about the men outside?
His jaw tightened.
Not a problem anymore. He led me outside. The SUV near the trees was riddled with bullet holes. One man lay face down beside it, unmoving. The other was gone, just a trail of footprints leading into the woods. We got into Carson's car, and he started driving fast down the dirt road. Who were they? I asked. Victor's men, he said. The one pretending to be your husband was their inside contact. He's been using voice mimic tech. They use it for intimidation. It's how they trick people into opening doors. My stomach twisted. So David really is. Carson didn't look at me. We're still not sure. The next few hours were a blur. Carson drove nonstop, cutting through back roads, keeping the headlights low. He didn't talk much, just kept scanning the mirrors. I could feel the tension radiating off him. Finally, near dawn, we pulled into an abandoned warehouse near the docks. Inside were two black vans and three armed agents waiting. One of them, a tall woman with sharp eyes, approached us. "Agent Carson. Ruiz sent us." Carson nodded.
She's the one.
"Sarah Miller." The woman turned to me and offered a small smile. "You've been through a lot, ma'am. You're safe now." She led me to one of the vans. Inside were computers, maps, and several open files spread across a table. One of the screens showed surveillance photos, Victor, his properties, and several bank records. The woman, Agent Ruiz's second-in-command, apparently, pointed to a series of images. We traced Victor's operations to a private estate outside Washington, D.C. "But there's something you should see." She clicked a button, and the screen changed to a new image, a grainy photo, time-stamped 2 days ago. It was David.
Alive.
He was sitting at a table beside Victor, his face pale, eyes sunken, hands cuffed to a metal chair. I covered my mouth with both hands, gasping. "He's alive. Oh my God, he's alive." Carson exhaled slowly. "They're keeping him as leverage. Victor knows we're closing in. He's going to use your husband as a shield." I turned to him, desperate. "Then we have to save him. Please." He shook his head. "It's not that simple. If we go in blind, we could lose both of you." The female agent leaned in. "But there's another option. Victor's expecting Sarah to run. What if she doesn't?" Carson frowned. "You mean?" She nodded. "We use her as bait." My heart skipped. "What?" "No." But the woman was calm. "We'd never let you go in alone. We'd wire you, track every move. Victor will think he's won, and that's when we hit him." Carson looked at me, conflicted. "It's dangerous. You could die." I stared at the photo of David. His eyes looked haunted, but alive. And in that moment I knew I couldn't walk away. "I'll do it," I said softly. Carson's jaw clenched. "Sarah." "I have to," I interrupted. "He may have betrayed me, but he's still my husband. And Victor won't stop until someone stops him." For a moment, Carson just looked at me. Then finally he nodded. "Okay, then we do it your way." By nightfall, the plan was set. I'd go to Victor's estate pretending to surrender myself in exchange for David's safety. The agents would surround the property, waiting for my signal, a coded phrase I'd slip into conversation. "The storm's moving fast." That would trigger the raid. As I stood near the van, watching the agents prepare, Carson approached me. He handed me a small silver necklace. "Hidden mic. They'll hear everything. Just keep it together in there." I nodded, fingers trembling. What if he sees through it? Carson looked straight into my eyes. "Then you fight. You've done it before." He gave a small smile, the kind that carried both fear and faith, and stepped back as I climbed into a black SUV. The van doors closed behind me. My heart raced as the driver started the engine. Through the windshield, I could see the long, dark road ahead, leading straight toward Victor's world. And somewhere inside that darkness, my husband was waiting. But what I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that Victor already knew we were coming, and that he had a plan of his own. The SUV rolled through the night like a ghost, no headlights, no sound, but the gravel crunching under the tires. Every turn took me deeper into the woods, away from the safety of the agent's perimeter. I sat in the back seat, my hands resting in my lap, thumb grazing the tiny pendant that wasn't really a pendant at all, the microphone Carson had given me. They could hear me. They had to. The driver, a silent, stocky man in a cap, didn't speak once. He never even looked at me in the mirror. Finally, after what felt like an hour, I saw it. A mansion. Massive. Gated. Its windows glowed with faint gold light, and armed men moved like shadows along the perimeter. Victor's estate. The gate opened automatically as we approached. Cameras tracked the vehicle as it rolled up the circular driveway and stopped in front of a marble staircase. When the driver got out, he opened my door, but didn't touch me. "Go inside. They're waiting." I stepped out, my knees almost giving way. The air smelled of wet grass and smoke. Somewhere in the distance, a generator hummed. As I climbed the steps, I whispered under my breath. The storm's moving fast. Nothing happened. No response in my earpiece. No static. No confirmation. I froze. The storm's moving fast, I repeated. Still nothing. The mic was dead. I turned slightly, just enough to glance back at the SUV. It was gone. A door opened above me, and there he was. Victor. He looked even colder in person than in the photos, silver hair slicked back, expensive suit pressed without a wrinkle. His eyes gleamed like polished glass as he smiled faintly. "Mrs. Miller," he said smoothly, his accent faint but elegant. "How lovely to finally meet you. Come in." I forced my chin up, pretending not to tremble. "Where's my husband?" He tilted his head, studying me. "Straight to business." "I like that. You'll see him soon." 2 guards flanked me as I walked into the mansion. Every instinct screamed to run, but the hallways stretched endlessly, lined with portraits and dim chandeliers that swayed slightly with the wind. Victor led me to a large room filled with monitors. Security feeds showed different angles of the estate, guards, vehicles, even the surrounding woods. "Beautiful setup, isn't it?" he said. "All this, for peace of mind." I glanced at one of the screens, and my breath caught. David. He was in a small room, sitting against the wall, his face bruised but unmistakably his. I stepped forward, pressing a hand to the monitor. "Please, just let me talk to him." Victor's smile widened.
Soon.
"But first, a question." He turned toward me. "Did you really think the FBI could track me? That you could walk in here with their little microphone and I wouldn't notice?" My blood ran cold. He reached out and tapped the pendant around my neck. "Cute." "Really?" He held up a small black remote and pressed a button. Sparks flickered from the necklace, and it went dead. I stepped back instinctively. "What do you want?" He folded his hands behind his back. "You, my dear, are the last piece. Your husband's cooperation was limited."
But you?
"You have something he doesn't." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" Victor turned the monitor again. It showed a scanned document, something I hadn't seen in years. My father's old company ledger. "You inherited his encryption rights," Victor said. "Your father was brilliant but secretive. His final vault is locked behind a biometric key, your DNA. David told us everything." My heart cracked. "David told you?" Victor nodded sympathetically, like a man consoling a child. "He's been very cooperative. Pain is persuasive." My knees weakened. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. So that was it. The betrayal. The missing years. The reason Victor wanted me alive. Not because of who I was.
Because of what I carried.
Victor gestured toward the door. "Shall we reunite you with your husband?" I didn't trust him, but I nodded. 2 guards escorted me down a long hallway into a cold, concrete room. The smell of dampness and bleach hung in the air. And there he was, David. He lifted his head slowly. When he saw me, something flickered in his eyes. Shock, guilt, maybe both. "Sarah?" His voice was hoarse. "What are you doing here?" I rushed toward him, but the guard stopped me. "I came for you," I whispered. He looked away, shame twisting his features. "You shouldn't have." Victor entered behind us, slow and deliberate. Touching, isn't it? The lengths love will go to. I turned on him, fury rising through my fear. "You think this is love? You tortured him." Victor's smile barely moved. "He made choices. As did you. But the game ends tonight." He pulled out a tablet, its screen glowing with code. "Your father's vault will open using your retinal scan. Then and only then you both walk free." I hesitated. My pulse thundered. And that's when I saw it, Carson. Through the reflection in the tablet's glass, a faint movement outside the window. Dark figures closing in, rifles raised. The FBI had found us. My voice trembled as I said the phrase again, this time with meaning. "The storm's moving fast." Victor's smile faltered. "What did you just say?" Before he could react, the window exploded inward. Gunfire erupted. Shouts filled the air. The guards dove for cover. Carson burst through the smoke, firing 2 clean shots that dropped both men beside me. Sarah, get down. He tossed me a pair of cuffs. Free him now. I scrambled to David, unlocking his wrists. His hands shook as he stood. Victor tried to flee toward the back corridor, but Carson was faster. He tackled him against the wall, weapon pressed to his throat. It's over, Victor, Carson growled. You're done. Victor just smiled, blood on his teeth. You think this ends with me? He looked at the ceiling. Then I heard it, the faint, high-pitched whine of a timer. Carson, I whispered. What is that? He turned. His face went pale.
Bomb.
Everyone out now. The agents grabbed Victor and dragged him out, shouting orders. Carson pulled me and David toward the door, but the corridor was already filling with smoke. We ran. My lungs burned. My ears rang from the distant beeping that grew faster, faster. We barely made it past the front steps when the explosion hit. The blast threw us forward into the dirt, heat licking at our backs as the mansion erupted into flames. Carson coughed, pushing himself up. You okay? I nodded, shaking, covered in ash. David. I turned. He was lying a few feet away, motionless. I crawled to him, hands trembling, and pressed my fingers against his neck. A pulse. Weak, but there. Hold on, I whispered. Please hold on. Carson called for medics over the radio. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. As the flames swallowed Victor's empire, I looked at David, his face scarred, eyes fluttering open just enough to meet mine. Sarah, he whispered. I'm sorry. Tears filled my eyes. Don't you dare die before you tell me why. He managed a faint smile. Because I never stopped trying to protect you. Then his eyes closed again. Hours later, dawn broke over the smoldering ruins. Victor's body was never found. Carson suspected he'd escaped through a tunnel beneath the house. David was taken into federal custody for protection and medical treatment. Whether he was an accomplice or another victim, that was still being decided. As for me, I sat in the back of the ambulance, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunrise through the smoke. Carson approached quietly. You did good, Sarah. I shook my head. It doesn't feel like it's over. He sighed. It's not. Not yet. Victor's still out there. I looked down at my hands, trembling but steadying slowly. Then I said the words I hadn't dared to before. Then let's finish it. The morning after the explosion felt strangely calm. Almost too calm. The kind of silence that hums under your skin, like the world is holding its breath before something else happens. I sat in a quiet hospital room beside David's bed, the rhythmic beeping of his heart monitor, the only sound. His face was still pale, wrapped in bandages, but he was alive.
For now.
My hands were wrapped around a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Across from me, Agent Carson leaned against the wall, flipping through a tablet filled with reports. His expression was grim. Victor's network wasn't small, he said finally. The fire destroyed most of the data, but not all. We recovered fragments from his backup servers. Offshore accounts, encrypted transactions, hidden partners. I looked up, weary, but alert. Partners? Carson nodded. Your father's old company, Wright Engineering, wasn't just a construction firm. It was a front for something much bigger. Your father built a system that could move money undetected through international infrastructure projects. Governments, corporations, private investors, all tied together. He kept the access key under his own name until his death. And that key is in my DNA, I said softly, piecing it together. Exactly. I stared at David's motionless hand, the same hand that used to hold mine when we'd sneak out for coffee before dawn. So, Victor wasn't just laundering money, he was trying to gain control of the system. Carson sighed. And he's not finished. We intercepted a message last night, sent minutes before the explosion. Victor ordered something called Project Rebirth. We don't know what it is yet. The name chilled me. Rebirth. It didn't sound like a business plan. It sounded like a threat. Before I could respond, David groaned softly. His eyes fluttered open. David, I whispered, leaning forward. He blinked slowly, confused. Where are we? Safe, I said quickly. The FBI has you. You're protected. His gaze drifted toward Carson, then back to me. Guilt clouded his expression. Sarah, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Then tell me what happened, I urged. Tell me everything. He exhaled shakily. Victor came to me 2 years ago. Said he wanted to expand the company internationally. I thought it was a normal contract. But when I signed the papers, I realized I'd given him access to your father's vaults. I tried to back out. That's when he started threatening you. I swallowed hard. So you joined him to keep me safe? David nodded weakly. He made me move the funds, hide them in layers so deep even I couldn't track them. But then he found out the system needed your DNA. That's why he ordered Elena to bring you in. He said once he had you, he'd let me go. My throat tightened. He lied. He always lies. David's hand reached out and brushed mine, trembling. But you have to stop him, Sarah. There's a hard drive, hidden in our old house, behind the fireplace. It has everything. Names, accounts, passwords. If Victor gets to it first. He didn't finish. His heart monitor began to spike. Carson stepped closer. Easy, Mr. Miller. You're safe. Just rest. But David wasn't listening. His eyes darted toward me with sudden panic. Sarah, listen, someone on the inside. The monitor flatlined. I gasped. David. Doctors rushed in, shouting orders, pushing us out of the room. Carson pulled me into the hallway as chaos erupted behind the door. I stared through the small glass window, numb. He was fine. He was just talking. Carson's face was grave. Someone silenced him. I turned sharply. You mean someone in the hospital? He nodded grimly. We found traces of potassium chloride in his foreline. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. I stepped back, trembling. You said he mentioned someone on the inside. Carson rubbed his temple.
Yeah.
Inside where, though? The FBI? Victor's network? We don't know yet. I pressed my hands to my face, tears threatening to break. He died trying to warn me. Carson placed a steady hand on my shoulder. Then we honor him by finishing this. That night, we went back to my old house. It had been sealed with police tape, abandoned since the day everything fell apart. Carson's team moved methodically, scanning for explosives or traps before letting me inside. I stood in the doorway, heart heavy. The smell of old wood and rain lingered. Every photograph, every memory still sat where I'd left it. I knelt by the fireplace, brushing soot off the bricks until my fingers found the loose panel David had told me about. Behind it was a small steel box. Carson knelt beside me. You sure this is it? I nodded, pulling it out. My hands shook as I entered the small keycode on its side, the one I remembered from my father's journal. The box clicked open. Inside was a hard drive, wrapped in black fabric. Carson took it gently. We'll decrypt this at headquarters. This might be the key to everything. But before he could stand, the lights flickered. Then went out. Powers cut. One of the agents called from the hallway. Carson swore under his breath. We've been made. Move, move, move. Gunfire shattered the windows. Bullets tore through the walls. I ducked instinctively as shards of glass rained down. Carson pushed me behind the couch, returning fire through the front window. Stay down. I could see shadows moving outside, men in tactical gear, faceless under black helmets. Victor's men. Again. Carson's radio crackled with static, then a voice. You can't run forever, Agent Carson. It was Victor. His voice calm, taunting. You should have left her to die with her husband. Carson's eyes narrowed. You're finished, Victor. You lost your empire. Victor laughed, the sound hollow and chilling. Empires burn and rebuild. That's what rebirth means. Then the transmission cut out. Carson turned to me, breath tight. We have to move now. We crawled toward the back door, bullets still slicing through the living room walls. The agents laid down cover fire as Carson and I dashed into the yard. A black van waited behind the tree line. The back doors flew open, and 2 more agents waved us in. I jumped inside, clutching the hard drive. Carson followed, shouting, "Go!" The van sped off, tires screeching. In the distance, I saw the house go up in flames. The second time in my life everything I owned had burned to ash. We drove for hours through the back roads until we reached a secured underground facility outside DC. As we stepped out, Carson handed the drive to a technician. "I want this decrypted by morning." The tech nodded, disappearing into a glass-walled lab. I stood there, numb but determined. "He's still out there." Carson nodded. "And now we know what he's planning. Rebirth isn't about money, it's about control. We think he's using your father's system to reroute government funds. If he succeeds, he'll crash the economy and rise as the only one with access to the rebuilt network." I froze. "He wants to reset the system." "Exactly." I clenched my fists, feeling something inside me harden. "Then we stop him. Whatever it takes." Carson looked at me, something like pride flickering behind his exhaustion. "Then you'd better rest. Tomorrow, everything changes." But as I lay in the dim bunk that night, I couldn't sleep, because I kept hearing David's last words echoing in my mind. "Someone on the inside." And for the first time, I wondered if that inside wasn't Victor's network, but the FBI itself. The facility felt colder that morning, not from the air conditioning, but from the tension that hung in every hallway. Agents moved quietly, their faces drawn and tired. Nobody spoke much. Everyone could feel it. Something was about to break. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw David's face, the flicker of guilt, the strain in his voice, the warning. Someone on the inside. When I woke up, I found Carson already in the control room, standing before a wall of monitors filled with encrypted code. The hard drive we'd retrieved from my house was finally decrypted. Lines of data streamed across the screens: bank records, offshore accounts, shell corporations, and one folder labeled Revelation. "What's that?" I asked, stepping closer. Carson's jaw tightened. "That's what we're about to find out." He opened the folder. Inside were hundreds of scanned documents, letters, and photos, some from my father's archives, others clearly more recent. But what froze my blood wasn't the information itself. It was a photo. Carson, standing beside Victor, shaking his hand. For a moment, my mind couldn't process what I was seeing. That's not real," I whispered. "Tell me that's not real." Carson's face stayed unreadable. "Sarah, tell me." He sighed and turned toward me slowly. "It's complicated." I took a step back. "Complicated? You're working with him?" His voice softened, almost regretful. "I was. Once. Years ago. Before he became what he is now." I stared, disbelief flooding through me. "You were part of his operation?" "I was undercover," Carson said sharply, trying to expose his organization from the inside. "But when I blew my cover, Victor framed me, buried me in so deep that the Bureau almost kicked me out. I've been trying to bring him down ever since." My mind spun. Every instinct told me not to trust him. But another part of me, the part that remembered how he risked his life in that burning mansion, hesitated. Before I could answer, the screens flickered. A live video feed appeared, grainy, static-ridden. Victor's face filled the center monitor. "Good morning, Sarah," he said smoothly. "Agent Carson. How touching to see you both still alive." Carson stepped forward, jaw clenched. "Where are you, Victor?" Victor smiled faintly. "Closer than you think. But I didn't call to chat. I called because I want to offer you something, Sarah." I glared at him. "You've taken everything from me. What could you possibly offer?" "The truth." He leaned closer to the camera. "Your father wasn't the hero you believe he was. The system he built wasn't meant to protect anyone, it was meant to control them. He created a network so powerful it could bankrupt entire nations with a single command. I'm merely finishing what he started." I shook my head. "You're lying." "Am I?" he said softly. "Ask Agent Carson. He's seen the files." I turned sharply toward Carson. "Tell me he's lying." Carson hesitated. Too long. That silence told me everything. I stumbled back, the room spinning. You both used me. Carson raised a hand. Sarah, listen. But before he could finish, the lights went out. The facility plunged into darkness. Then, red emergency lights flashed to life, bathing everything in crimson. An alarm blared overhead. Breach detected. Level 1 lockdown engaged. Carson cursed. He's in the system. I shouted over the noise. You said this place was secure. It was, he snapped. He's using your father's old network. It's rewriting our security protocols in real time. The monitors flickered again. Victor's face returned. You can't stop rebirth, Sarah. But you can survive it. Come with me, and you'll have power beyond anything your father dreamed of. I stepped closer, shaking. And if I don't? He smiled coldly. Then you'll die like your husband. The line cut. Carson grabbed a sidearm and turned toward the corridor. We're leaving.
Now.
But I didn't move. My mind was racing. The only way Victor could have breached the network was through the system's master key, my DNA.
I realized something then.
If I could open it, I could also shut it down.
Completely.
Carson, I said suddenly. Get me to the main server room.
He frowned.
That's suicide. If he's already in the system, then I'll lock him out. He hesitated, then nodded. Follow me. We ran through dim corridors, alarms wailing, agents shouting orders as we passed. Gunfire echoed from somewhere deep in the building. Victor's men were inside. We reached the central data vault, a massive room filled with humming servers, glowing blue lights reflecting off the metal walls. Carson keyed in the access code, and the doors slid open. Inside, I ran to the terminal, heart hammering. The system recognized my presence instantly. A biometric prompt flashed on screen. User, Sarah Wright Miller. Confirm DNA signature to proceed. I pressed my thumb against the scanner. The screen blinked green. Access granted. Carson stood behind me, gun raised toward the door. Make it quick. I typed furiously, recalling fragments of my father's journal, the kill code, the failsafe he'd mentioned in his notes. A single command line that could shut down the system forever. But as I entered the last sequence, the door burst open. Victor himself stepped through, flanked by 2 men with rifles. His suit was immaculate despite the chaos, his expression calm, like he'd already won. You really are your father's daughter, he said, almost admiringly.
Brave.
Reckless. Carson turned his weapon on him. Drop it, Victor. Victor just smiled and lifted a small detonator. You shoot me, this whole place goes up. I froze, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Victor took a slow step forward. Don't throw away your legacy, Sarah. Together, we can rebuild the world. I looked at Carson, then back at Victor. And suddenly, I wasn't scared anymore. You're right, I said quietly. I am my father's daughter. Before he could react, I hit enter. The screen flashed red. System purge initiated. All networks terminated. A deep rumble filled the room as the servers began to shut down one by one. Lights flickered. Alarms screamed. Victor's calm facade cracked. What did you do? I finished what my father started, I said. I destroyed it. He lunged forward, but Carson fired first, the bullet catching Victor in the shoulder and spinning him to the floor. The detonator clattered across the tiles. Carson kicked it away and dragged me toward the exit. Move! We sprinted through the corridors as the building systems collapsed behind us. The floor shook, sparks flying from the ceiling. We burst out into the night just as a shockwave rolled through the ground. The entire facility erupted in a burst of fire and light, the sound swallowing the world. Hours later, the smoke cleared. Carson and I stood by the ridge overlooking the burning ruins. Emergency crews were already arriving, their sirens distant echoes. Victor's body was never found. Carson turned to me, exhausted but relieved. You did it. The network's gone. Every trace of Victor's empire erased. I nodded slowly, my eyes fixed on the rising sun. Then it's finally over. He hesitated. It's over for now. I looked at him. What do you mean? Carson handed me a small flash drive, the only thing that had survived the explosion. This was found in Victor's jacket, he said. It's encrypted, but the label it says Phase 2. My heart sank. Even dead or gone, Victor had left something behind. I stared at the flash drive, then back at the horizon, the first light of dawn warming my face. Then we find out what it is, I said quietly. And we finish it for good this time. Carson smiled faintly. You really don't stop, do you? I shook my head, finally allowing myself a small, tired smile. Not when the storm's still moving. He laughed softly. Then I guess the storm's got company. And as the fire burned behind us and the wind carried the ashes into the sky, I finally felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time.
Peace.
But somewhere, far away, across an ocean, a phone rang in a dark room. And a familiar voice answered. This is Victor. Prepare Phase 2.